In the lively Yoruba village of Ipitu, Adunni was a name that commanded both respect and caution. Widowed young but remarkably resourceful, she had built an empire of farms and trade routes that made her the wealthiest woman in the region. Despite her success, Adunni's heart had grown cold, hardened by years of self-reliance. She believed deeply in the principle of hard work and had little patience for those who, in her words, lived off the sweat of others. Beggars were especially loathsome to her. To Adunni, they symbolized laziness and a lack of dignity, a view she often voiced loudly to anyone within earshot. One sunny afternoon, Adunni sat on her veranda, sipping palm wine and surveying her vast estate. The rhythmic sounds of pounding yam in distant huts reminded her of her industrious nature. Suddenly, her peace was interrupted by the voice of a blind beggar. "Please, more," he called, his voice humble but firm. Adunni's servants tried to shoo him away, but the beggar remained unmoved. "I only ask for food," he continued, "and in return, I will share a story that might be of value to you." Amused by his audacity, Adunni gestured for the servants to let him approach. "A story?" Adunni asked, raising an eyebrow. "What could a beggar possibly tell me that I don't already know?" The blind man smiled knowingly. "More than you expect, more." Intrigued despite herself, Adunni instructed her servants to bring him some food. She decided to indulge this peculiar man if only to prove that he had nothing of worth to say. As Oluwole, the blind beggar, settled onto a mat and began eating, Adunni crossed her arms and waited impatiently. The beggar, unhurried, finished his meal and wiped his hands on the edge of his warm cloak. Then, he began his tale. "There was once a great king named Oba Adrabig," Oluwole started, his voice weaving the story like a skilled griot. "He was wise and prosperous, beloved by his people for his fairness. But as his wealth grew, so did his pride. One day, a poor farmer approached him with a simple request, to spare a small portion of the king's abundant land for farming. The king laughed and dismissed him, claiming that charity made men weak. Adunni leaned forward despite herself, her curiosity piqued. Oluwole continued, describing how the farmer, humiliated but undeterred, prayed fervently to the gods. The gods, angered by the king's arrogance, struck the land with drought. Crops withered, rivers dried, and the people suffered. Desperate, the king sought the farmer, only to find him thriving on a tiny, hidden patch of fertile land blessed by the gods. The farmer forgave the king but warned him never to let pride overshadow kindness again. When the story ended, Adunni's lips tightened. "A nice fable," she said dismissively, though her mind lingered on its lessons. She gave Oluwole a few coins and instructed him to leave. Yet, as she watched him shuffle away, she felt an unfamiliar unease settle in her chest. For the first time, Adunni began to wonder if her disdain for the less fortunate had blinded her to something greater. The next morning, Adunni woke up early, her thoughts still troubled by Oluwole's tale. She walked through her compound, overseeing her workers as usual, but her heart wasn't in it. By midday, she noticed something peculiar: the beggar was nowhere to be seen. Oluwole, who had stubbornly refused to leave the day before, seemed to have vanished without a trace. "Did anyone see the blind man leave?" she asked her servants, but none had an answer. They shrugged, uninterested in the matter. For reasons she couldn't explain, Adunni felt a pang of worry. The man had seemed frail, his feet calloused from endless wandering. Where could he have gone? Shaking off her unease, Adunni resolved to continue with her day, though the blind man's words lingered in her mind. She found herself replaying the story of Oba Adrabig, recalling how pride had blinded the king to the needs of his people. Could there be a lesson in it for her? She dismissed the thought, convincing herself that she was nothing like the arrogant king. By evening, however, Adunni's unease had grown. She instructed her head servant, Yakubu, to send out a few boys to search the nearby village for Oluwole. "Ask if anyone has seen him," she ordered. Bring him back here if you find him. Yakubu frowned but obeyed without question. As the night fell and the search party failed to return with any news, Adunni's heart grew heavier. For the first time in years, she found herself feeling something unfamiliar: guilt. The following day, Adunni stood at the edge of her compound, gazing at the road where Oluwole had last been seen. The morning wind carried with it the scent of rain and something else, a faint whisper, as if the land itself was speaking. Adunni shook her head, dismissing the sensation as a trick of her imagination. Yet, as the hours passed, the feeling persisted. She began to hear snatches of phrases in Oluwole's voice, echoing in her mind. Pride can blind even the wise. Determined to shake off her growing unease, Adunni decided to visit the market. The bustling energy of traders and buyers often helped clear her mind. As she strolled through the market, her eyes scanned the crowd for any sign of the blind beggar. Instead, she found herself drawn to a storyteller performing in the square. The man's voice was rich and resonant, drawing a large crowd as he narrated tales of kings and their downfall. Adunni's breath caught when she heard the storyteller recount a version of Oluwole's tale. She pushed her way through the crowd, interrupting the performance. "Where did you hear that story?" she demanded. The storyteller, startled, pointed to a faded piece of parchment. "It was written by a wandering griot many years ago," he explained. Adunni stared at the parchment, her mind racing. Could Oluwole have been more than he seemed? The realization struck her like a thunderclap. She needed to find him, not out of guilt, but because his stories held answers to questions she hadn't yet dared to ask. Adunni returned home from the market with the parchment in hand, her thoughts swirling. As she unrolled it on her desk, the faded ink revealed stories that felt strangely familiar, tales of pride, kindness, and redemption. Oluwole's voice seemed to leap off the pages, as if he himself had written them. She summoned Yakubu and gave him new instructions. "Send messengers to nearby villages. I need to know if anyone has seen a blind storyteller recently." Yakubu hesitated. "Madam, why expend so much effort on a beggar?" Adunni's eyes flashed. "Because he's not just a beggar," she snapped, though she wasn't entirely sure how to explain her urgency. All she knew was that Oluwole's stories were more than entertainment; they were a mirror reflecting truths she had long ignored. Over the next few days, the messengers returned with scraps of information. In one village, an old woman spoke of a blind man who told stories in exchange for food. In another, a child described a kind storyteller who had blessed their family with wisdom. The descriptions varied, but one detail remained constant: the man always disappeared as mysteriously as he arrived. Adunni began to piece together a trail, each story leading her closer to understanding Oluwole's purpose. She realized that his tales were not random; they carried a pattern, a message she was meant to decipher. As the clues mounted, so did her determination. For the first time in years, Adunni felt a spark of purpose that went beyond her wealth and influence. She resolved to find Oluwole, no matter how long it took or how far she had to go. As Adunni prepared for her journey, word of her search spread through Ipetu. The villagers were baffled by her sudden obsession with a beggar. "Has she gone mad?" some whispered. Others speculated that the man had cursed her. Adunni paid them no mind. She had always been a subject of gossip, and this was no different. What mattered now was finding Oluwole and uncovering the truth behind his stories. Before setting out, she visited the village elder, Bobatond, a man known for his wisdom and deep knowledge of Yoruba traditions. She recounted her encounter with Oluwole and the tales he had told. Bobatond listened intently, stroking his grey beard. When she finished, he sat in thoughtful silence. "Adunni," he said finally, "you are chasing more than a man. You are chasing a destiny that has been calling you for years." Adunni frowned. "What do you mean?" Bobaton gestured to the parchment. "These stories are not just tales, they are lessons meant for you. Perhaps this Oluwole is a messenger, sent to guide you back to a path you have strayed from. Adunni left the elder's compound with a mix of hope and trepidation. She didn't fully understand what Bobaton meant, but his words resonated deeply. With her servants and supplies ready, she set off on her quest, the parchment safely tucked away. The road ahead was uncertain, but Adunni felt a newfound resolve. She would find Oluwole, not just for his stories, but for the answers they promised to reveal. Adunni's search for Oluwole led her to the nearby village of Aponri. Known for its bustling yam market and friendly inhabitants, Aponri seemed a likely place for a wandering storyteller to visit. As Adunni and her small entourage approached, the aroma of roasted yams and the cheerful chatter of traders filled the air. Adunni dismounted her horse and walked through the market, her gaze scanning every corner. She approached a group of women who sat weaving baskets under the shade of a large baobab tree. "Excuse me," she began, her tone firm but polite. "Have any of you seen a blind man who tells stories?" The women exchanged curious glances before one of them spoke. "A blind storyteller," she repeated. "Oh, yes, a man fitting that description was here not long ago. He told us a tale so beautiful it brought tears to our eyes." Adunni's heart leaped. "Do you know where he went?" The woman shook her head. "He left as suddenly as he came." But he spoke of heading toward the river village of Ij. Adunni thanked the women and continued her search around the village, hoping for more clues. She spoke to children, elders, and even the village chief, but their answers were the same: Oluwole was always a fleeting presence. Though frustrated by his elusiveness, Adunni felt a growing determination. His stories had left a mark on everyone he encountered, and she was beginning to realize how deeply they resonated with her as well. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Adunni decided to rest in Aponri for the night. In her quiet room at the local inn, she unrolled the parchment and read its stories once more. The words seemed to glow in the candlelight, as if urging her to press on. Tomorrow, she would head to Ij, her resolve stronger than ever. The journey to Ij was long and arduous, the path winding through dense forest and rocky trails. Adunni's entourage grew weary, but she pressed on, driven by an urgency she couldn't explain. When they finally arrived, the village greeted them with the serene sound of the river flowing gently along its edge. Fishermen cast their nets, and children splashed in the shallows, their laughter ringing in the air. Adunni wasted no time and sought out the village head, a stout man named Beggar with a booming voice and a ready smile. "We are looking for a blind storyteller," she explained. "Have you seen him?" Beggar nodded thoughtfully. "Oh, yes, Oluwole. He was here just a few days ago. He told us a tale about a fisherman who let his greed destroy his family. It was a powerful story, and it left us all reflecting on our choices." Adunni leaned forward eagerly. "Do you know where he went?" Beggar sighed. "He mentioned traveling upriver to a settlement near the old shrine of Oromala. But be warned, the journey is treacherous, and few dare to venture that way." Adunni thanked Beggar and took a moment to consider her next move. The mention of the shrine intrigued her. It was said to be a place of wisdom and spiritual guidance. Could it be that Oluwole was deliberately leading her toward the shrine? Adunni couldn't shake the feeling that this was no mere coincidence.